My daughter-in-law told my son that his mother's hands looked like she'd spent her whole life scrubbing other people's floors. She wasn't wrong. But the way she said it, like it was something to be ashamed of, that's what started everything. I'm 63 years old. I worked as a hospital janitor for 26 years at St. Joseph's Medical Center in Columbus, Ohio. Not a glamorous job, I know that. I mopped floors in the ICU at 2 in the morning. I cleaned up things most people couldn't stomach thinking about. I wore scrubs and rubber-soled shoes and carried a mop bucket that squeaked a little on the left wheel no matter how many times my son Terence tried to fix it for me. Terence, my boy. He's 38 now, works in commercial real estate downtown, does well for himself, better than I ever did, and I mean that with nothing but pride. His father, my husband of 31 years, passed from a stroke when Terence was 19. So it was just the two of us for a long time. I picked up extra weekend shifts at the hospital so Terence could finish his degree at Ohio State without taking on more loans than necessary. I packed his lunch on move-in day. I drove 4 hours each way on a Tuesday to watch him walk across that stage. I'm telling you all of this so you understand what I mean when I say I wasn't looking for credit. I was just his mother. That's all I ever wanted to be. He met Sabrina about 6 years ago at some networking event downtown. She's from the north side of Columbus, the kind of neighborhood where the houses have names and the driveways are longer than my entire street. Her father is a partner at a law firm. Her mother chairs 3 different charity boards. They are, as Sabrina once described them to me, very established. I remember nodding and smiling and thinking that was an interesting way to describe your own parents. Sabrina isn't a bad person. I want to be clear about that. She has qualities I genuinely admire. She's organized, she's driven, she keeps a beautiful home. But there was always something underneath her politeness with me. A kind of careful distance. Like she was being gracious about something she hadn't chosen. The first Christmas after they got engaged, I came over to help with dinner. I brought my sweet potato casserole, the one with the brown sugar and pecans that Terence has asked for every year of his life. Sabrina looked at the dish and said, "Oh, that's sweet. We're actually doing a full catered spread this year, so maybe we can just set that aside." She smiled when she said it. It was a very pretty smile. I set it aside. I told myself it was her home, her holiday. People do things differently. I was raised to be a guest graciously, and I intended to be one. The second year, I didn't bring anything. I showed up in my nicest blouse, the burgundy one I'd bought, specifically because Terence once said it looked good on me. And Sabrina's mother, Patricia, looked at me for a moment too long when I walked in and then said to Sabrina, loud enough that I heard it from 8 feet away, "Is she the one who works at the hospital?" The way she said "works at the hospital" did not mean doctor. Terence didn't hear it. He was in the kitchen with Sabrina's father talking about some property deal. I heard it. I went to the powder room for a few minutes, and then I came back out and I smiled, and I helped carry dishes, and I did not say a word. That's what women like me do. We absorb things. We've been absorbing things our entire lives because the alternative, making a scene, demanding to be seen, always costs more than we can afford. You learn that early when you're a black woman with a mop in a hospital full of people who look past you. But I want to tell you about last Easter, because that's the one that changed things. That's the one that made my son see something he'd been not seeing for a long time. Sabrina's family does Easter brunch at their house. It's a whole production. Fresh flowers on every surface, a mimosa bar, a hired chef making eggs Benedict to order. Very lovely. I don't say that sarcastically. It genuinely is lovely. And every year Terence asks if I want to come, and every year I say yes because he is my son and I want to be where he is. This year I was running about 15 minutes late. I'd had some trouble with my knee. It's been giving me problems since February, and getting down the front steps of my house took longer than I planned. I called Terence on the way to let him know. When I arrived, the brunch was already in full swing. Sabrina's sister and her husband were there, her parents, a couple of their friends I'd met once or twice. Terence came to the door and hugged me and took my coat, and everything felt fine. I was standing near the buffet table talking to Sabrina's Aunt Beverly. Genuinely nice woman, we'd had good conversations before, when I overheard Sabrina in the hallway just around the corner. She was talking to her mother. They weren't whispering exactly, but they weren't being careful either. She showed up in orthopedic shoes, Sabrina said. Mom, she literally looks like she just got off a shift. Patricia said something I couldn't fully make out. I know, Sabrina continued, but Terence gets so weird about it. She's his mother, I get it. I don't love having to explain her to people, you know? Like, she means well, but she doesn't really fit. I stood very still next to the buffet table. Beverly was still talking, something about her granddaughter's dance recital, and I was nodding and making the right sounds, and inside I was somewhere completely different. I was back in the ICU at 2 in the morning. I was in the parking garage on a February night, with my feet aching and my back stiff, sitting in my car for 10 minutes before I had the energy to drive home. I was in the bleachers at Ohio State watching my son shake the dean's hand, wearing those same orthopedic shoes because I'd been on my feet since 5 that morning. I fit just fine, I thought. The question is whether you're willing to make room. I excused myself from Beverly and went to find Terence. He was in the living room showing Sabrina's father something on his phone. Property listings, I guessed. I touched his arm gently and asked if we could step outside for a minute. He looked at my face and he knew immediately something was wrong. We stood on the back porch. The air was still cool the way April air in Ohio is, that particular kind of cold that feels left over from winter. I told him what I'd heard. I said it quietly and as plainly as I could. I wasn't crying. I was past the kind of hurt that makes you cry. I was in the kind of hurt that just settles in your chest like a stone. Terence didn't say anything for a long moment. He was looking at the backyard. Sabrina's mother's garden, which was immaculate. Every spring bulb coming up exactly where it was supposed to. Mom, he finally said. I'm sorry. I know you are, I said. I didn't know she felt that way. And this is the part I want you to understand, because it matters. I believed him. Terence is not a man who would knowingly allow his mother to be humiliated. But there's a difference between not knowing and not looking. And I think my son, who loves his wife and loves his life, and has worked very hard to build something different from what we came from. I think he had been doing a lot of not looking. He went back inside. I stayed on the porch a few minutes longer because I needed the air and because I needed to decide something. Not whether I was angry, I'd already settled that, but what I was going to do with it. When I walked back into the house, Terence was already talking to Sabrina in the hallway. I couldn't hear what he was saying, but I could see his posture. Straight, quiet, serious. The way he gets when something matters to him. Sabrina's expression shifted a few times. She glanced over at me once. I went and sat with Beverly, and we talked about her granddaughter until the eggs Benedict were ready. Here is what happened next, and I tell you this part not because it was dramatic. It wasn't, not on the outside, but because it was the first time in 6 years that I felt like my son was fully in the room with me. After brunch, when people were starting to drift toward coats and goodbyes, Terence came and sat next to me on the couch. Just the two of us, tucked into the corner of the living room, while everyone moved around us. He took my hand, this big hand of his that used to be so small I could wrap both of mine around it, and he said, I want you to know that I see you. I've always seen you, and I should have made sure everyone in my life sees you too. I'm sorry it took me this long. I didn't say anything right away. There was a lump in my throat the size of a fist. You gave up a lot for me, he said, and I let her make you feel like that was something to hide. I squeezed his hand. I said, "I don't need anyone to make a fuss over me, Terence." He said, "I know, but you deserve it anyway." We sat there for a moment, just the two of us, while Sabrina's family swirled around us with leftover mimosas and spring coats and the particular cheerfulness of people who haven't had a hard conversation yet today. A week later, Terence called me. He said he and Sabrina had talked, really talked, multiple long conversations, and that Sabrina had something she wanted to say to me. He put her on the phone. I won't tell you, it was perfect. An apology under those circumstances rarely is, but she said, "I've been unkind to you in ways I told myself didn't count. They counted, and I'm sorry." Her voice was stiff in the way voices get when someone is working hard to say something they mean but aren't comfortable saying. I respected that. Actually, it's easy to apologize when it flows naturally. It's something else to push the words out when they don't want to come. I told her I appreciated her saying it. I meant that too. I don't know what their marriage looks like behind closed doors. I don't know how much of what Terence said to her landed, or whether it will hold, or what the next holiday will feel like. Those things aren't mine to know. What I know is that my son chose in a quiet and clear way to stand up and be counted. Not loudly, not with drama. Just he made sure I knew I was seen. That's everything, when you get right down to it. Not the parties or the catered spreads or whose house has the prettier garden. Just do the people who are supposed to love you make sure you know that you are seen. I've been thinking a lot lately about what it means to have worked the kind of job I worked. 26 years of making spaces clean so that other people could do what they came to do. Doctors could focus on saving lives. Families could sit with their sick people without the weight of everything else. I was never in the background. I was in the foundation. My son knows that now. He's always known it, somewhere. But knowing something and speaking it out loud are different things. And sometimes the people we love need us to speak things out loud, so that everyone in the room, including the people who've been measuring us against the wrong ruler, has to hear it too. I still wear orthopedic shoes. My knee isn't getting better, and honestly, they're the most comfortable thing I own. I wore them to Terence's birthday dinner last month. A nice restaurant downtown, Sabrina's choice, and she picked a good one. I sat across from her the whole evening, and she was, if not warm exactly, then present in a way she hadn't always been before. At one point, she asked me about my years at the hospital, not to be polite, with something that looked like actual curiosity. I told her a few stories, not the hardest ones, just the ones with light in them. She listened. That was enough. For now, that was more than enough. The truest thing I know after 63 years is this. The work you do doesn't define your worth, but the love you put into it does. Every floor I mopped, I did it thinking about my son. That's not a small thing. That's not something to set aside. That's the whole thing. That's everything.